so specifically, is that going towards, and I keep trying to make this distinction because I think some people honestly I think when they point to things like, hey, look at how popular Bernie's agenda is or something. Yeah, there's truth to that and there's some opportunity, but we also need to be real that like we're facing really major losses. And there is, as I was saying, like in the opening commentary, just a serious consolidation around monopoly capital right now. And at the same time, the fact that after a decades long, there's a decades long propaganda war against organized labor that went along with, judicial, legislative, lobbying, and the way globalization was designed to undermine labor. And it does seem like in the last couple of years, at the very least, we're still very behind in terms of the legal infrastructure for people, but there's a gap that's being closed in terms of the propaganda war. And more people in workplaces are thinking to themselves, you know what, the best way to protect myself at Whole Foods is not for John Mackey to do a vision quest where he decides I should get a face mask because, some guru told him, but maybe I have a labor union.
Right. Well, I mean, this is kind of I guess is going all the way back to what Marx talked about, right? Is like the capitalist class can't help themselves, right? They will always work towards the kind of consolidation of wealth and power at the top, and just turning the rest of us into this vast, disaffected, exploited class. And it's like culture allows us to kind of buy into that ideology, that belief that we could still make it, that we can still get, like a stable, comfortable life and retire with dignity, when times are relatively okay, when there's still some hope for upward mobility. But the powers that be, both in the kind of, in Washington, D.C. down the road, but also Wall Street, again, they can't help themselves, and I think that since the recession, especially, and the quote unquote recovery afterwards, right? Democrats, Republicans, and Wall Street have shown just how uninterested they are, or how confident they are, I guess I would say, that regardless of how much they screw the rest of us over, regardless of how much they hoard wealth and power and resources, amongst themselves in broad daylight, like they're not even trying to hide it anymore. Their confidence is that we will be so disorganized and disaffected, and we will be at each other's throats, and we will have so many legal and institutional barriers in our way that we won't be able to do anything about it. And I think that, you're absolutely right to kind of point out that, as exciting as the kind of labor mobilizations in the past years and going on right now are, we have a long way to go. The labor movement is nothing compared to what it was, and it's nothing compared to what it needs to be. And I think that we are starting to get more people kind of involved in that process, get more people interested in labor struggle. And that's an essential part. Now we need to forge those sorts of bonds between people who are now just joining the fight, now becoming interested in the fight, and plug them in with people who have been doing this fight for years and decades, and who have so much knowledge that we need to learn, and who can show us how to build community with our fellow workers and actually win. Because we're going to need that, because then the next step is that once we start getting more organized, across sectors and on a more mass scale, we're going to run up against the roadblocks that, have been put in place over decades, right? The Janus decision in the Supreme Court was just one, thing among many that alludes to the fact that, like, institutionally, the powers that be have been trying to dismantle any sort of recourse that working people have to get justice in this country. And like I said, we're playing very far behind, and we're going to need a lot of sweat and blood and solidarity to kind of overcome those sorts of obstacles. But, like you said, I think it is really, really hopeful that, that propaganda kind of that anti-labor propaganda effort is starting to, or if it hasn't already, lost a lot of its momentum. And there are other, counter propaganda efforts that are doing the vital work that we need to do, in our respective circles, especially us who are involved in, media, to help educate people, to help lift up the voices and struggles and stories of our fellow workers, to platform organizers and labor journalists who can teach us what we need to know. I think, more than anything, like, people ask me all the time, like, what do workers think? And I say, the whole premise of Working People is that I can't speak for workers, right? More than anything, I speak for the cause of speaking to our fellow workers, right? I think we need to make that more of a concerted effort on all of our parts and not just an anecdotal exercise. And the exciting thing is there's a lot of people there who are already doing that and who, we can learn from and plug into. And I really want to give them a shout out because, you mentioned Studs Terkel, who I referenced in the very first episode of Working People that I ever did with my dad. I gave him a shout out because I see myself, partaking in that beautiful tradition that Studs was a part of. But I share in that tradition, and I have learned, in that tradition from amazing labor writers and journalists and activists like Sarah Jaffe and Michelle Chen with the Belabored podcast at Dissent, Michael Sinato at The Guardian, Juliana Feliciano Reyes at the Philly Inquirer, Edward Ongwezo Jr., Laura Gurley at Vice, Mindy Iser, Sarah Lazar, Hamilton Nolan at Indies Times, Kim Kelly, Chris Brooks, Kenzo Shibata, the newsletter Strike Wave, Labor Notes, Payday Report, Working Class Heroes, The Red Nation, Rust Belt Abolition Radio. Like, there's so many great shows that people
it's the end of a record.
Of it. Take advantage of it. Get involved in it. Right? Yeah. There's so much there, and I think we have a real opportunity here to create the kind of grassroots, bottom-up media ecosystem that we always deserved. We can make the working people that we are trying to reach part of the media that we are producing, and you can use that media to build the sort of politics that we need. Sorry, that was a long rant, but I wanted to give a shout out.
I like that. That was the end of a 90s record. But Maximilian Alvarez, I really appreciate your time, man. It's the Working People's Podcast. Check it out. Max, thanks, man. Stay safe.
Thanks, brother. You too.
Be well.
You just watched a Michael Brooks Show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.